Support for this episode of PBS Reno Arts is provided by the Nevada Arts Council. Arts and creativity make us stronger, fueling innovation, prosperity, and thriving communities across Nevada. They boost our economy, promote well-being, and enhance education, empowering Nevadans of all ages. The Nevada Arts Council nurtures these essential creative forces. Together, let's elevate the arts in every corner of our great state. More at nvartscouncil.org. This is PBS Reno Arts. I'm Dave Santina in the studio of PBS Reno in Reno, Nevada. And today I'm very excited because we're talking about murder. We're talking about the Reno Little Theater's upcoming Dial M for Murder. And I have Melissa Taylor here to talk about it, executive director of Reno Little Theater and the director of this upcoming play. Thanks for coming and giving some time. I know you're in the middle of preparing.
Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, we are just days away from opening, so it's a really busy time, but a really fun one, and I'm excited to tell everybody about the show.
Yeah, I get to go see the preview. So one of the nice things about being married to a theater writer, my wife writes reviews for the News and Review. I get to come to these previews and get to see some shows before they're completely ready for prime time, but see them develop, and that is fun.
It is really fun, and there's a lot that happens between Wednesday and Friday. It's incredible how much can change over a 48-hour period in a theater.
I bet. So right now, we are recording this a week before opening night.
Oh, yep, I didn't even realize. It's a week away.
It's a week away. So I love that because this means that this podcast will be available on Monday of premiere week or of I guess opening week, and so hopefully people listening will give the show a chance because I think it's for those who know the Hitchcock movie, it already has an appeal, but I think as a stage play, I'm very intrigued to see how it comes across. And so and I saw something earlier before in a little bit of research before we talked that you have not seen the movie version, right?
I have not personally.
That's incredible.
I wasn't meant to direct the show, and when I stepped into it, I had that moment of, do I watch it or do I not? And I think the script is so good that I didn't want to watch it. I wanted to just take the text, and I know of Hitchcock. I've seen other Hitchcock
hard
films.
Not to know.
Right. So it's not that I'm not aware of what audiences will expect, but I really wanted to just kind of jump right into the script that we're working on.
And this was not originally a movie anyway. This was a stage play first. I did not know that.
Yeah, it was actually a play by Frederick Knott, who then wrote the screenplay for the movie. So they were written by the same person. There are actually very few changes from the original stage script to the screenplay, but there are a few. And then I think this was 2022, this version premiered, and it's Jeffrey Hatcher's adaptation.
Okay, so obviously you can't tell us everything. We don't want anything spoiled, but I am curious about how much of the story or the show can you talk about today without ruining it?
Oh, it's tough because I am so unaware of how many people might be coming to see the show who haven't seen the movie or don't know anything about it. Our audiences, I'm so excited to say, have really been broadening at Reno Little Theater. And we now have a cross-section of our community that could be anywhere from, 15 to 95 to our main stage shows. And so I'm riding this really fine line of what do we say about this? Because I'm sure there are people who are going to be aware of what the actual story is, but I don't want to take anything away from the people who may not know. So the good thing is that in Dial M for Murder, you know very quickly who the bad guy is. It's not a mystery, it's a thriller. So I can tell you that the general outline of a marriage and an affair and a plot for murder is all intact.
There's got to be a murder, or they wouldn't call it Dial M for Murder. They give it a totally different name, and that wouldn't be as much fun. So how do you approach directing a show like this? It's something that you go in knowing a lot of people have heard of, but you're directing a new adaptation. is it a blank slate? Do you start from scratch and say, how do I want to present this? Or do you feel like, well, I have to do certain things a certain way because otherwise it just isn't right?
That's a really interesting thing for me because I'm not only the director of the show, but I'm also the executive director of the company. So I wear a producer hat as well. And part of my job as a director, it's just the storytelling aspect. But my job as a producer is to make sure that this thing is done well and that people want to see it and that we're marketing it and all of those things. And they're not exactly the same objectives there. So I think I may approach this in a way that's slightly different than people that don't have to wear both of those hats. But I think we have a great team of people. We have a dramaturg on staff who does a lot of research for us. So that's the first thing that I do is, okay, here's the text. Now let me do some research. What are the key things I need to know about the time period, the place, the social expectations of that time? What are the important plot points? What are the things that people might not understand from a modern perspective? And I need to quickly make sure that they're not confused about that. So there's a lot of that up front. And then a lot of play, just a lot of play and what works. And
so for those of us who are not steeped in the theater, you mentioned a dramaturg. What does that mean? What does that term mean? So
we have a resident dramaturg. His name is Luis Galvez. He is fantastic. And his job is on every production we do. He comes in and he does a presentation about all those things that I just mentioned. So he'll talk about the time period. He'll talk about any versions of the show that have previously existed. He'll let us know about common themes. And then throughout the process, if we have any questions for what would the significance of this be? What would the penalties for this crime actually have been? Because they're not stated in the script. He'll go and find that information out for us so we know how to play that thing. How serious is it that he plotted to murder his wife? Is that a death penalty case? Is it not? When did the death penalty stop happening in the UK because they don't have it anymore? So that's the kind of stuff that our dramaturg will do for us on every show. And obviously it's different. So the last show I directed was SpongeBob. And on that, he was literally saying, you should watch this episode of this cartoon. And
really?
Yeah. It's a great job. Really fun.
When you get to order people to go watch cartoons, that's a pretty good gig.
Yeah, for
That's
sure.
a fun job. All right, so this is starting a week from today when we are recording, the 17th. It runs through how long?
Right now we're scheduled to run through February 2nd.
Okay. Is that a little squishy in case it's very popular? Do you have an opportunity to extend?
We do.
I always wonder about that. How do you decide those kinds of things? Because you are, like you said, you're not just the director, you're also the executive director of the whole organization. So you have, you want it to be super popular, but then if it is, you have decisions to make as an administrator. Right,
yeah. So when we build our seasons, we look at the shows that we think may, based on past data, do really well, things that we expect may be popular with our audience. And sometimes we'll build in a secret extra week that the cast and crew is all agreed to do. The good thing is that's now doubling in purpose because the winter months, sometimes we get snow, sometimes we get illness that we have to deal with. So we do have a little cushion just in case. I'm hopeful that we will need it because people just really love this show and want to see it.
I hope so too. I have seen the film. It has been a long time, so I've chosen not to revisit it before seeing the play because I don't want to have every detail fresh. I want to go in and as much as possible be surprised by this version. So you said you did not originally intend to direct. You're a sub in this case.
Yeah.
So how far along was the show before you came in?
So I actually found out from the originally hired director that there was a chance that he was going to have to step away from the project. And so he cast the show and had a lot of the original concepts for the show and then did have to step away from the show. But I knew that was there was a chance that was going to happen. So I had offered early on to just be available and to be there and kind of be shadowing him and trying to understand pretty early on in the process, just in case, because I have had to step into other shows before. Luckily with this show, I've worked with everybody involved already. So we had it really did help. It was like, there's a shorthand that we don't have to go through all of the, how do we work? We know. And so I stepped in, I think it was the second week of rehearsals where it was like, okay, officially you're going to do it. But that's pretty late in the process because planning for a show typically starts months in advance. And so we did do a scramble, and I did make a lot of changes to, what time period the show is taking place in, and sort of what the set was going to look like. I had to ask our technical director if he could maybe redo the scenic design. And he did. And so, yeah, there were a few changes that happened, but
wow. So what is the time period you chose?
So I actually chose to do it in the time period that the script initially dictated, which is 1952 in London. So the other director had wanted to move it, I think, into the 60s. And I just felt that I didn't want to make any changes to the script because I think the script is really tight. It's really good. Okay.
And so changing it would have required some references to the time period or to the era, and maybe
I think it raises the stakes, honestly, to keep it in the 50s. Specifically, there are relationships in the show that would have been illegal at that time.
Got it.
And the death penalty still existed at that time. It actually, I think, was outlawed like 2 years after this takes place. And so if it didn't exist, then the stakes are not as high for getting caught. And so, we just decided, in talking to the cast and thinking about it myself, that I wanted to just go right back and say, okay, I think that the other director would have done some really great things, but knowing that it was my turn to take it and steer that ship, I was like, I think I'm going to make it easier for myself and put it back.
Well, fair enough. I mean, you're not only directing this, but you're running the show for the whole organization. And so I wonder about that. You're admin and you're creative. You're on both sides of this. So do you ever have any internal conflicts with decision making because you want one thing as a director, but you realize that that's a draw on your resources as an admin?
Oh, that's a good question. I think I've gotten better at that. I started as a creative, and I've been doing theater my whole life. I fell into my position at RLT 12 years ago. I shouldn't say fell in. I worked to get that position.
Yeah,
but
give yourself some credit.
But I think there is a real balance between the art and the show and the business, I always say. And I think that one thing that my whole staff does really well is walk that line. And I think that you need creative people to be in the office, and you also need people on the creative side who understand some of the business decisions that have to be made in producing art. And so I'm happy to say that I think that we've got great minds that have strengths in both places, or either or, on our team.
Nice. Well, and you have some dedicated people who have been around for a while and know their business, right? We've done Artifacts episodes years ago on Chad Sweet and production he was working on at the time. So, having someone with that experience and that passion is already a head start. And you have a small team, but they all know their stuff.
Every single person that's at RLT is there because they love what they do. Whether that's on staff, or that is the volunteer corps that we have, or the people who are working on the show right now. Everybody's there because it's something that they're really passionate about. Nobody's there because they have to be. And I think that actually really makes everything easier, and that I think you can feel that. I think as an audience member, you can feel when somebody is passionate about what they're doing. And I can tell you without a doubt that everybody involved at RLT and in this show is passionate.
I have no doubt. And that extends to the cast, right? I know you say you didn't cast that group, but you know all of those people, right?
Yeah. And, our goal is always to have our season have at least 50% of the casts be new. And that is something that we actually last year was, I think, like 63% of the actors who worked on our stage had never done so before. And so that's something as a producer, I'm always kind of pushing the directors toward, like, how can we get more people involved and give more opportunities? In this case, it was a new director. And in that space, often you're saying, we don't necessarily want to have a new director with a whole bunch of new actors, because then you've got potentially some challenges on both sides. So when he told me who the cast was, I approved the casts, and I said, I think this is great that you have this experienced cast who is going to make this easy for you as a new director.
Nice.
And then so when I ended up stepping in, I was like, well, good for me, because I have worked with everybody before.
Well, that's an excellent start. If you're going to step on a moving treadmill, so to speak, it's good that you're with people you know, because that's going to make it a little bit easier to transition. This cast is also made up of people who are also all funny people from improv experience, right? A few months ago, I talked to Ian Sorensen when what is now Crocodile Nixon was a previous iteration of the improv group, and I realized that when I looked at this cast list, these are all the same people, or some of the same people at least who I've seen before, and so I'm realizing that you're dealing with a group of experienced performers, actors, but also they're all comedians. This is not a comedy show.
It is not a funny show.
So how does that work?
It's funny because actually last night I had to give Ryan a note and say, it's not a bit. Don't do that. Like, it's just one place where I was like, I see why this could be funny, but it's not funny. It's interesting because 4 of the 5 cast members are in that improv troupe together. Okay. Crocodile Nixon, that's our house.
4 out of 5.
4 out of 5. And so they have a lot of extensive training in listening and reacting on the spot. And they're all obviously really comfortable and trust each other, which is very important. Bringing Carly into the mix with this group that already has all these relationships has been great. We've had to talk about that. How do you navigate that and help pull her into this space where everybody trusts each other? The thing that works really well, though, is that, the scenes that Libby has as Margot are with the more violent, the more scary things are with people that she knows are going to keep her safe in real life. I hope, I think, I know. And I know that as an actor, that's a really important thing when you're having a moment that's really raw and emotional and scary, to know that actually the person that you're acting with is looking out for your safety and cares about you. That's really, really a helpful thing. And again, I think improv actors are just so good at listening and reacting and making decisions really quickly. And in a show like this, where people are lying to each other and having realizations on the spot, you get to see their brains working, and it's really, really fun.
That sounds great. I look forward to seeing that. And you just made me think of something that to a non-actor it might seem unusual, which is the sense of trust. Because to a person who's never acted, you might think, well, you're just reading lines and memorizing lines and playing. You're play acting on stage. What's there to be worried about, or what's there to feel vulnerable about? But that's not really the way it works when you are in a character and studying that person and trying to live, even temporarily on stage, that person's life and experience, right?
And this show is such heightened emotion. It is betrayal. It is fear. It is suspense. It is all of these places that are not very comfortable to be for an extended period of time as a human. And so to come into a room and to pretend to live in that space, But to be trying to do so as authentically as possible, you really have to let some vulnerability happen. And that does, I think, really require that you feel safe in the room and trust the people around you so that, we're there to catch you when it all comes crashing down and the lights go off,
Right.
And there are a lot of physical bits in this show. There's a lot of confrontation and a lot of intimacy. And so, again, that trust is really, really important.
And that's, as a director, I can see the challenge that you might face when you're dealing with 4 out of 5 cast members who are improv comics, who are naturally funny people and who instinctively find the funny in every moment, and have to not find the funny in a moment that could be played for laughs versus played seriously, and they have to play it a certain way.
Yeah, I will add that Carly is also very funny. There are 5 people in this cast that are actually really naturally gifted comedians. Carly just recently stepped in as an understudy for POTUS for not 1 but 2 roles, and our last show, one of our last shows, which was a wild physical comedy. And so I am working with not 4, but 5 incredibly talented comedic actors.
A full fist of funny.
Yeah, but I think here's the thing that I found is, I think people are going to be shocked at what great dramatic actors these people are. And I hope we'll maybe not pigeonhole them into just being these great comedic actors, but seeing that they are really thoughtful actors who have a lot of depth of range and emotion. We joke about doing a comedic run, like a late night, like what if it was a comedy? But that won't actually happen. And the thing is that humans, we're complicated. And so sometimes there is humor in moments that aren't really funny.
True.
And so I'm trying to, we're all trying to find that balance too. I think the most interesting thing about this play is the amount of lying that is happening on stage. And so how do you, as an actor, tell a lie that is convincing to the person you're lying to on stage, but not so convincing that your audience gets confused about it and thinks that you're telling the truth, So
that is a delicate line to walk. It
really is. But there are so many layers to these characters.
So we mentioned there are 5 cast members, and you've mentioned a couple of names, but go ahead and give us all of them.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So we have in the cast, we have Libby Baki is playing Margot Wendis. Ryan Costello is playing Tony Wendis. Bryce Kyle is playing Inspector Hubbard. Ian Sorensen is playing Captain Lesgett. And Carly Tillman is playing Maxine Hadley. We also have 3 understudies, and some of them will actually have performances, which is great. We have Mohammed Shamin, who is understudying all of the male roles. Natalie Hurt, who is understudying Maxine. And Alex Bunyard, who is understudying Margot. And so all of those actors have also been in the room with us. Then behind the scenes, we have our stage manager, Emma Green. And we've got Chad Sweet did scenic design, lighting design, and I think that's it on this one. Props have been a combination of people kind of all working together, including myself and Jessica Johnson and Chad. Our sound design is coming from Anthony Mendoza. We've had a dramaturg, an intimacy coordinator, a dialect coach. Our intimacy coordinator is Thomas Rayo, and our dialect coach is Rosie Brownlow-Calkin. I mean, we've got more people off stage working on any show than you do on stage. Right. And it's a big team working really hard.
Incredible. So for a show like this, you mentioned an intimacy coordinator. I'm curious about that. That's one of those positions that people have become familiar with the name of the position over the last 10 to 20 years, I guess. But I'm not 100% comfortable with my understanding of what that person is doing. Now, there are scenes of intimacy. Mm-hmm. Is that coordinator a position? Is there almost there like a counselor, or do they actually come in and help, like coach on stage how to do intimacy without crossing a line?
So we have an intimacy coordinator for this season as well. It's Thomas Rayo this whole season. And they work on every show we do, whether there's physical intimacy or not. And so I think, yes, initially, that is part of what their job is to make sure that people understand consent and boundaries, and that people have the tools that they need to check in with each other, that people understand that we choreograph intimacy the same way we choreograph a dance or a fight. It is specific, and you are meant to do this exact thing every time. It's not the kind of thing where you're going to go practice off on your own and just see what happens. It's actually a very specifically staged and intentional process. And intimacy coordinators have the training to make sure that we are doing that in a way that is safe. But they also give tools for conflict resolution. They also give tools for, just communication and making a space feel like safe for everybody in the room at all times. I needed him on SpongeBob too, believe it or not.
Really?
Yeah. So we did some great work with, there was a kiss, but then we also did some great work about, how do you have 20 bodies, running all over the place, changing in front of each other and all kinds of things. So yeah, I think they're just an invaluable addition to the process.
It's not just on stage focused.
No, yeah, it's about the process as a whole.
Interesting. Okay. Well, that thank you for explaining that. I find those things fascinating. I figure if I have any questions, somebody out there listening would have something similar. For sure. And I'm always fascinated by certain positions and how they work, because I'm not as familiar with them. And so that was one that I always found fascinating. All right. So you must have your calendar must be full, because you're not just in the process of this show, but this is the 90th season. You have a full slate for the year, plus all of the other things that RLT offers. You offer more than just stage plays. You have youth workshops. You've got the improv. You've got story hours and Sunday jazz. I mean, I can go down the list from your website, but people can go find that for themselves, I guess. There's a lot to enjoy. How do you prepare for multiple projects in various stages? Because this show took months to prepare. Obviously, at the same time that this is happening, someone is preparing your next show. Mm-hmm. How much overlap is there, and at what point do you start to pull your hair out?
It's a wild ride. I will tell you that we're actually already planning our 91st season. And so part of what I'm doing outside of working on Dial M right now is working with our artistic leadership committee to plan for, what's going to be happening in July of 2026.
Wow.
So it does take a lot of planning. We've got a great team of people who we all agree that when we kind of stepped into our roles, I knew personally, I wanted RLT to be a space for our community that is accessible, that there is always something going on. And there is. Last season, I think we had 274 performances.
Wow.
And we were operational 360 out of 365 days. We, at any given time, are usually working on 3 to 4 events at the same time. Our education program does, not only do they do the Washoe District, Washoe County School District breaks and do camps, but we do 4 or 5 productions with kids each year, and we're just getting ready to launch another one on Saturday. We've got 4 resident companies with us: Ageless Repertories, Senior Readers Theater, Latino Arte, For the Love of Jazz, the Improv Troupe. There's just literally something going on all the time. And it's our calendar. We have a giant calendar in the office that's color-coded, so we know what space is available and when.
All right. And so people can find all of this by going to the website, correct?
Yeah, renolittletheater.org. We're also on Facebook and Instagram.
Excellent. So one thing I noticed on your website, which I thought was interesting, is that you have an engagement invitation page.
Yes.
And I have never seen anything like that before. So how do you hope that people engage when they come to RLT?
So we put that together. Actually want to shout out, there is a theater company in San Francisco, I think it's San Francisco Rep, that has a statement about what they hope their theater is and how they hope their community will interact with it. And one of the things that we have been finding kind of post-COVID maybe is that people have different expectations of what a night out at the theater is supposed to look like. I think there's a generational divide on that. There may be a socioeconomic divide on that. There's what we've been told is the way we should behave in a theater. And all of those things are different perspectives. But at the end of the day, what we decided is that we want people to be able to feel like they can come in and react authentically, while also understanding that this is a community space where it's everybody's reaction is a part of the event for everybody else in the room, that this is a collective experience, and that actually the more you interact with the people around you before the show, at intermission, and after the show, and the more you talk about what you saw, the more we are going to feel like a community and know each other and learn from each other. And that's actually what our mission is. The shows are important. The stories that we're telling are important, but it's about coming together as community members to create art and then to digest it and talk about it and learn about each other. And so that invitation is basically just saying, hey, come in. We really hope you'll enjoy these shows, but we also hope that you'll talk to each other and that you'll learn something about your neighbor, and that everybody will do so with respect for the time and effort and energy that people are putting in and the money that people are spending on it, you know?
I like it. Well, I appreciate that you've taken the time to put it on your site as sort of a statement of RLT's intent by being a part of the community and inviting people to join. I love it. I'm going to be there for at least for the preview. I might have to come back again. I do love seeing the development of shows. I know that they're not the same. Opening night and closing night are very different, and I think that's fascinating too. So hopefully people listening to this make the effort to come and see at least one performance during the run of Dial M for Murder.
I would say that this is also a show that you might want to see more than once, because there are things that you may or may not catch that once you see it, you go, oh, it was there the whole time. You know, I love stuff like that.
I do too. That sounds great. Well, thank you for coming and talking about it. I know you're very busy getting ready, so I will release you to go back and finish it. I invite everybody who's still listening here to watch Artifacts on PBS Reno via broadcast or by stream on pbsreno.org or the PBS Reno YouTube channel or even the PBS app. So many ways you can watch. Also, read Art Views at pbsreno.org. That's a wonderful series of columns. I ask you if you have a question or a comment or a suggestion, please send them to me at podcasts@pbsreno.org. My thanks to Melissa Taylor, and I thank you for listening to PBS Reno Arts. Support for this episode of PBS Reno Arts is provided by the Nevada Arts Council. Arts and creativity make us stronger, fueling innovation, prosperity, and thriving communities across Nevada. They boost our economy, promote well-being, and enhance education, empowering Nevadans of all ages. The Nevada Arts Council nurtures these essential creative forces. Together, let's elevate the arts in every corner of our great state. More at nvartscouncil.org.